Thank you very much in the first place to the organizers of this forum. I'm really honored and privileged to be here. To be honest, I would have wished to attend all these discussions since morning, but using the opportunity while being in Berlin, I also held a number of bilateral meetings, and I'm continuing to do the same tomorrow. And I am very sorry that I couldn't. I only joined the tail of my very good friend's discussion, which I always enjoy, and I was unable to listen to everybody. And sorry if I'm going to repeat what has been already said since morning or yesterday, given the whole theme of this gathering, the 30th anniversary since the fall of Berlin Wall. And this is clearly, all of us here, at least the ones who sit in this room, this topic resonates with each and every of us. And I will try to give you the perspective, Georgia perspective, and we always use this opportunity. Probably this is something that small nations have that characteristic, using all the platforms and opportunities to raise the awareness of the country that we represent, particularly the challenges that we are facing, the challenges that I will speak with your permission during my speech. I made some notes, given that I arrived only this morning, and straight from the airport I went to the meeting, and I tried to make my speech consistent. I will use the notes that I've made so that I do not forget anything that I want to deliver today. Well, obviously, this is a huge milestone that we are gathered, all of us, today. And indeed, it is a high time for all of us to reflect on those 30 years and to think of the perspectives and prospects, and think of the examples also that countries are facing with similar challenges. And 3 decades have passed since November 9th, 1989, when the physical manifestation of the division of Germany was removed, followed by its reunification, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the rebirth of independent nations in the Eastern and Central Europe. A new era started for countries like Georgia as well. And this year and this day are charged with particular symbolism and a sense of deep gratitude on the part of all Eastern and Central European states liberated 30 years ago from the Soviet oppression. Many of us still try to live up to the promises that the fall of the wall provided to our prospects of becoming free, independent, and prosperous nations. But for clearly one thing that we have learned, security and freedom should not be taken for granted. This is something that we can say from our example, and we do not need to seek examples, because Georgia is here. I represent my country, and Ukraine, the example, I hope that you also had a representative from Ukraine. If not, everybody knows the situation and the challenge in Ukraine. We are the examples in Eastern Europe that we are still witnessing that I could call contemporary Berlin Wall. And this is a very sad story. On a daily basis, literally every day, we see the wall expand. We see the communities and families being divided because of the barbed wire fences, and this is something that we have to face this challenge on a daily basis. This is a big security threat, and this is the threat that I think in this audience knows it perfectly well. It does not. It's not only the concern of Georgia and Ukraine. This is the concern that should be recognized by the whole European Union and whole Europe, because this is not a standalone threat, security threat to these countries, but this is a threat to the whole concept of Europe free and at peace. These words that I'm sure that everybody has heard so many times. We keep looking for solutions for that, and this solution is not easy to find, because we know what we are facing, and we know the challenge is so huge that this cannot be solved overnight. For Georgia, we have been struggling in this situation for almost 30 years since regaining our independence. But we still believe that the solution lies in the unity and the resilience. And the unity and resilience, which is the heart of transatlantic security and the resilience. And the core to everything is the commitment to open door policy from the European Union and NATO. My Baltic friends know that perfectly well and know that this is coming from the bottom of our heart, even if this sounds unrealistic, but I do believe that this will be a realistic objective sooner or later. But if we are talking about the security challenges and how we should solve that, and if we are talking about unity and the resilience, the solution lies in the first place, being committed to the whole idea of where that resilience and unity lies. And this is commitment to open door policy. I'm keeping repeating these words, but this is something that Georgia is very much committed to, this idea. And Europe should understand, and transatlantic community should understand, that countries like Georgia, countries like Ukraine, cannot overcome this problem without the unity from the entire community. And I think the freedom that Georgia and other nations in Eastern Europe had fought for, this cannot be taken for granted either. And we should ensure that we live this freedom and democracy, which was a big pain for countries, for some countries even more painful than others, but it was a severe and very hard road for many nations, but we have achieved huge progress, and this progress should be secured and cherished so that we pass it over to our generations and next generations. I can go on and on. I know it is the end of the day, but this is the key message that I want to deliver today to this audience, to once again raise the awareness of European Union, where Georgia stands, those countries who still think and contemplate about the future of these countries, future of Georgia, Ukraine, and Eastern Partnership countries, but particularly the ones who have committed themselves to be part of the transatlantic community. Here we are to secure support, to secure further support, and you have been standing with us all the way through since regaining independence. And I would like to once again thank all of you for that, and once again express our commitment that Georgia will achieve its objective in the same way as our very good friends from the Baltic states achieved it many years ago. And I'm bringing this as an example because this is the first reference point. We know how much you fought for independence and how much you fought to become the full-fledged member of these very important organizations and institutions. Thank you very much, and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. That's very forceful. Why did you
stay here?
Yeah. Do we have any questions for Sophia Katsarava? I'm sorry, I'm doing this wrong. Katsarava. Now, this point. I know. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be in the center. You are in the center of our of today's discussion. Tell me, your internal. We have here fantastic, honorable members of African Parliamentary Community, Speaker of Central African Republic, and the members of their respectful parliament. So, Georgia, former in the Middle Ages, Grand Duchy, you know, occupied and captive by something like from middle of 18th century, and then again free for 3 years, becoming almost member of League of the Nations, 1920, 1922, against captive by Joseph Stalin, now free. So tell me about your feelings. So you are, even in Soviet Union, inside of Soviet Union, it will be interesting to hear for our African very honorable and great friends. You were not your sense of Mediterranean culture, your sense of freedom were not become captive. You were example for us for those terrible years. Not looking that Joseph Stalin is coming from your region. I'm sorry to mention that, but Joseph Stalin sculpture was under my crazy demands was, and other people asked you to put down the sculpture in Gori. And it was done. And so finally you change your mentality and synchronize with European Union or European mentality. Now we can speak, Georgia, Italy, Greece, like our, how to say, Mediterranean, okay, Black Sea, but Mediterranean neighbor. So how you feel, it's a huge complicated question, slowly shifting again back your mentality from captivity from other region, mostly dominated by not democratic country, to dominant democratic trend. 28 members of European Union family, something with inclusions of Council of Europe, 48 members, but other entity, but underway to NATO and European Union. Tell me how you feel the speed is enough. Well, we just said that Ukrainians, after 30 years, probably can be more speedy. Well, they have 30 years for being free to European Union, to Western civilization. How is speed? It's in you think that you are enough speedy in the reforms and in mentality business, enlarging your tolerance, including equal rights for everyone, including women rights and everything. All those points and points and points. Who now we have here in Berlin, in Paris, in London. How you are satisfied with the speed inside? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Speed of reforms.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A very good question, Emanuelis. Well, my answer to that would be you can never be happy with the speed. And there is always the expectation, particularly not just from the person talking on behalf of the ruling party necessarily, but as an ordinary citizen, there is always the expectation from the public that we could have done that yesterday rather than today or tomorrow. But let's look at the big picture. And you also mentioned the words mentality and shift. I don't think that Georgians ever needed to shift the mentality towards dominant democracies, because Georgia always belonged to that part of the family. Simply, Georgia has been under the Soviet regime for 70 years, and that's quite a long period of time. But talking about the speed and the reforms, as I said, there is never, you can never be happy with that. But let's zoom out where Georgia was 28 years ago exactly. That's when Georgia regained its independence, and how Georgia looked. And let's look at Georgia today. And it's not just physical manifestation or physical demonstration or visual demonstration how the country looks like. And there is a stark contrast what it looked like. What a great opportunity for advertising my country. What it looked like 28 years ago, devastated, in ruins, and now, of course, I'm not saying that it's ideal or perfect, but it is developing the way it should develop against the backdrop of a security challenge that we have, which is occupation of our territories, where literally on a daily basis, because of the Berlin Wall, as we call it, we have to, the progress can be easily hampered. But we do not want to let this happen. I should have mentioned the German ambassador's words in my speech. I wanted to, because he recently, and I wanted to say that to this audience, given that it was the German ambassador who brought the reference to South Ossetia occupation line with Berlin Wall, and that the lesson should have been learned over the last 30 years. But I don't think that the perpetrators have learned the lesson of those 30 years. But what we have learned is that there is no other alternative other than peaceful resolution of conflict. There is no other alternative than the development and progress. Our place is clearly in the democratic society, because this is irreversible. This is the way Georgians and Georgian public thinks. As for the speed, there is always room to speed up the reforms, and that's why we are here to push the reforms in the way that we see is the right way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Can we have a microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have listened very carefully to the speech you have made.
Thank you.
And as the world is celebrating the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was a victory of democracy, a victory of freedom, that should be celebrated everywhere in the world, because according to me, freedom and democracy do not have any boundary. That's the birthright of anybody. So at the same time, the situation in your country is not very easy, as it seemed very difficult. So what are the feelings of people of your country toward the prospect of maybe joining the European Union?
Thank you very much. Also an excellent question. The situation in the country, to give you the idea of how things are developing, one major concern, occupation, the other side of Georgia developing quickly or not quickly, developing in the way I think that you can see a great contrast compared to the years before. But there is a clear message from the Georgian public that they want to see Georgia as a member of the European Union and NATO whenever that happens, and we want this to happen very soon. But we are being realistic, and we are not raising anybody's expectation. But this is the choice that people made when Georgia regained its independence. This foreign policy, this trajectory does not belong to any political party, neither our belonging or any opposition parties. That was the choice of the Georgian people, Western trajectory, membership in the European Union and NATO, and there is a huge support from the Georgian public to the foreign policy that our country has been pursuing since its independence. It's a challenging and bumpy road, of course it is, but the good story about Georgia is that despite the challenge, as I said, as we have to face it literally on a daily basis, the whole international community is with us, and there is a huge support. And we reformed the country in the first place for the benefit of our citizens and for the benefit of our country, to make the society and the country more resilient, to withstand all the challenges that not just Georgia, but many other countries have to face on a daily basis. That's where we stand, with support of the public, who are very much in support of the foreign policy, because there is a very simple answer to why we want the foreign policy that we have chosen. It is better life for Georgia and for Georgians. It is democracy and better democracy for Georgia, and it is security and prosperity. This is where we see and how the public perceives our future, our aspiration and our future objective.
Well, let's have a big applause again. And a short photo session.